Hey friends, my name is Sam and I'm a digital nomad. Not only am I a digital nomad, I've been running my business remotely for the last 6 years, and I'm going to tell you how I got started and how I'm building my business as a digital nomad. So we're going to take the personal, the professional, and marry them. I'm breaking this into two parts. The first part is going to be context. I'm going to tell you about my personal history, my very personal story, to help you understand, is this something that's possible for me? What parts of this are relatable to me? And then in part two, I encourage you to go and watch that video where I talk about building my business as a digital nomad. So we're gonna jump in, we're gonna get personal. I'm gonna talk about my family, my choices, my finances. Let's go. I have put this out there on social media and asked people, what do you wanna know about how I got here? And people said, what did you do about your relationships? What did it look like to quit your 9 to 5? What gave you the courage to take the leap? And we're going to dig into that and the finances behind this, as well as what's been the most challenging thing in the moment, but looking back, I'm super grateful for. Also, people had questions about traveling as a digital nomad and how my network is different, especially because I came from a corporate girly career. So let's let the record show how I got here. Did I always have the travel bug? Did I just end up traveling nonstop? Did my parents schlep me around the globe and that's how I got to 73 countries? Do I have a sugar daddy? The answer to all of those questions is no. So let's start back at the beginning. And we're going all the way back. My parents got divorced when I was 6. What does this have to do with anything? They lived 4 hours apart after the divorce. So every Friday night, my brother and I would get in the car, our mom would take us to our dad's, Sunday afternoon, we would do the whole thing in reverse. What does that have to do with traveling is that we got really good at communicating with adults that we weren't around. We had phone conversations with our parents all the time. Also, we got really good at living out of a backpack. We got really good at code switching because the two parents' homes were relatively similar, but also very different. We were almost raised differently on weekends than we were during the week. And that's jarring as a kid. But it also made us really, really good at changing dynamics, learning how to communicate with different people, and being really resilient. Fast forward to high school, the first time I actually went abroad was not with my parents. I found out that my French club got to go to France. We had to raise money for it or pay for it ourselves and go to France for 2.5, 3 weeks after my junior year of high school. I set my sights on that. I wanted to go so bad. I was the person who would call you from the blood center, getting you to sign up for your next blood donation appointment. I was a lifeguard. I worked random odd jobs. I asked family members for money. I participated in fundraisers. I even had somebody donate their own money to one of my payments, and that forever changed my life. I'm still so curious who the person is who donated money so that I would be able to go. I got a scholarship to be able to go. So when I was 16, I went abroad for the first time without my parents. It was in that moment that I realized how much I was capable of and what language and brain expansion and travel could really do to serve me. And I wanted it. I wanted more. Also, I grew up in one of those families where college wasn't an option. It was something that you do. Education was something that you continue to pursue, period. So when it came time to go to school, I went as far from home as possible. I went to a small private Christian school in Texas, and that was a wild experience, just so culturally different from what I was used to in relatively liberal like Davenport, Iowa. Two very different worlds. I thought that it was going to be something that it wasn't. I was told there was a huge international population there, and really that was American kids who grew up abroad to missionaries. So they were American, but they weren't American. It just wasn't the experience that I had been expecting. And then there were other things that happened that I just didn't love. So I figured what's better for me is to go back home, enroll at Iowa State, go to state school, save a bunch of money, and study abroad. So I came home. I did exactly that. So after freshman year, however, I had the opportunity to go teach English at a summer camp in France and get paid for it. So my parents came in clutch and helped me with my plane ticket. I went to France and I stayed there for 3 months. I taught English at a summer camp, so I was living my life in English, learning some French, and it was then that I realized that I could both live and work abroad. It was also a huge identity crisis moment for me because I was still enrolled in the school in Texas. I had officially lived and worked abroad. Like I had accomplished a life goal of being paid to live outside of the US. And that was just wild for me. So I came back to Texas, had a total identity crisis. I hated where I was and I had to figure out a way out. So I transferred to Iowa State, started looking towards study abroad, just kind of kept moving forward because at that point I just wanted to drop out and like go live abroad and like maybe teach English abroad for the rest of forever. I really had no plan, and because I had no plan, I stayed in school. And I looked at study abroad programs and I found one in the country of Cyprus, which is geographically the Middle East, economically Europe, culturally really just doing its own thing. So I went there. During that semester, I was able to travel to 13 new countries and again realized how feasible it was for me to live and work abroad. I wasn't working, but I was studying, and this was in 2014. So still, we had things like Skype and email and all the tools to be able to conduct business remotely. So I started a blog while I was there. And that blog ended up following me until about 6 months ago. I just let go of the URL for that blog. It was the first time I invested in myself as a business. It was the first time that I started publishing my ideas. It was huge for me. So I went back, I graduated, and really my only goal was to figure out how I could spend more time abroad. It was also then that I realized I wanted to visit every country, and that's still a goal of mine. So 10 years ago, I was at 13 countries. And as of this filming, it's June 30th, 2025. I've been to 73 countries. I'll be at 78 by the end of the year if all my travel plans go as planned. So I've continued to work on that goal at an average of, 6 new countries per year. So came back from study abroad and I was just like, I don't have any motivation to climb the corporate ladder the way that I used to. I was always really, really motivated, but my degrees were in marketing, international business, and a minor in French. And I thought, well, I don't really know how to get abroad. Applying for jobs abroad end up being these weird, like, Peace Corps style payment plans. And I had student loans. I had $60,000 in student loans. So I knew that I had to go to work. And as a marketing major, the most lucrative career was in sales. So I applied for a dream company. I received an offer and they said you can move to LA or Rhode Island. I chose Rhode Island for 2 reasons. One, my aunt, everybody has the cool auntie. My cool auntie lived near Rhode Island. And 2, because I knew that it was close enough to the Boston airport that I could do some really cool traveling while I was working. So I took that job, moved to Rhode Island, kept up the blog and called it 9 to 5 Nomad. And the whole purpose of it was teaching women like me who only had 10 to 15 days a year, weren't making a lot of money, how to budget travel, how to make the most out of their PTO. So I continued that while I was living in Rhode Island. I lived there for 2 years. Another company poached me. And I moved to Florida partially because of access to airports that would get me to Central and South America really easily. So I went to Florida for about 2.5 years. And then they moved me to Dallas, and I lived in Dallas for about a full year. Kept up the blog, started to grow a following, and started to think maybe this is my out, because I also during that time paid off my car, paid off my student loans, started saving money, and went from my first job making $36,000 a year with bonuses because it's sales to a base pay of I want to say $65,000 a year, but then with bonuses, I was making I think. My final year there, I was there for 6 months and I made $104,000 in 6 months. So I was paid off my debt, started to save money. Also, while I was in Rhode Island, I purchased a duplex. It was a huge part of my story because I was able to purchase it with 3.5% down. It was only worth about $175,000. And 3 years later, when I went to sell it, it was worth about $100,000 more than I had paid for it because of some changes that happened in the neighborhood. So some of it was hard work and some of it was just freaking luck. And that's the truth of it, is that not everything was calculated, but I knew that I needed to do certain things to accomplish my goal of living and working abroad. And when it became clear to me that my career wasn't going to have me working abroad, that I had to take that into my own hands. So that's why I kept up the side hustle. That's why I bought a duplex so that I could house hack, so that I was building equity and not paying rent. That the renter was paying most of the mortgage and that I could live there for free was the original plan. I actually never ended up living in that house, which is a whole different story, but that has to do with my company moving me to Florida. So financially, I was setting myself up for this goal, even though I didn't have like a crystal clear vision of what that side hustle was going to be. I didn't know if blogging was going to take off. Maybe I was going to become an influencer. Maybe something else happened. Maybe I could just get a really great remote job that was paying me $100,000 a year that I could be in whatever time zone I wanted. Honestly, that was probably my ideal at the time. So I didn't know. I didn't really have a set goal. I just knew that the goal was freedom. And I moved to Dallas in January of 2019. And I told my boss when I moved, I've got a year left. You need me for a year. I've got a year left here. And then I really need either out of the sales organization or out of the company as a whole. And she was great. She was super on board. And I was reassigned to a new director. And he didn't quite understand it. He didn't understand me. And that's okay. But there was some friction there. And I took a vacation to Lebanon and Cyprus in May. And then followed it up in June, late June, July of 2019 to go to Southeast Asia for 2 weeks. And he told me that it wasn't a good look that I was traveling so much, which is wild because I had earned my 25 days of PTO per year. And there was some shame in me actually using the days that were given. He didn't like it, and that's okay. So again, by 2019, I was debt-free. I had chosen not to get a pet. I didn't get a dog. I didn't get a goldfish. Because actually, funny enough, I did have a snake for a couple of years, but that's a different story. I didn't have anything tying me down. I had sold my house for a profit, which means that I also had the confidence. That answers the question of like, where did I get the confidence to do this? I always knew that I could do it, but I was terrified financially. I didn't want to do anything without a fallback. And I finally had that little bit of a fallback. And then really it ended up being a push out the door when I was on this vacation. I was in Vietnam with a friend of mine whom I had lived with in Florida, and he knew me, he knew my goals, and we went to check into a hotel, and I accidentally opened my work email instead of my personal email, and there was an email where he had just thrown me under the bus. Client facing, did it to his boss. It was a whole thing. It was really uncomfortable, and I got really anxious. I was just not present anymore, and my friend said to me, like, you've been whenning yourself for so long. You've said, when I pay off my car, I'll quit my job. When I pay off my student loans, I'll quit my job. When I save 10 grand, I'll quit my job. When the company offers to move me, I'll just say no and quit my job. And he's like, you've just continued not doing it. Like, what is actually holding you back? You have money, you have time, you have the wherewithal. What's holding you back? And I was like, shoot, you're right. So I called my boss, and she was super, super supportive. She was incredible. We're still friends to this day. I really, really appreciate her. And honestly, in that moment when I told her, like, hey man, this is my 2 weeks. Like, I'm on a 2-week vacation. I was on like day 4 of that vacation. I was like, I'm just not coming back. Love you, bye. And she was stoked for me. She asked me to write a message to the boss, and I did. And he, to my memory, didn't even say anything. I think he might have said thanks. There was nothing formal. I got my last paycheck, got my stock options, like got out of there. And yeah, so that's where I was in 2019. So to answer some of the questions that had come up online were, how did you quit your 9-to-5? Exactly like that. Knew that I had the resources to quit. I was not monetizing my side hustle. My blog and that goal were not monetized at all. I was maybe earning like $25 a month. And I was spending like $100-something a month on different things, softwares and that. So what gave me the courage to take the leap was knowing that I could, knowing that I had plates spinning, even if they weren't monetizing. And if I'm being candid, having money in the bank did not hurt. And then in that, the most challenging thing in the moment, but looking back that I'm grateful for, I am so grateful for the people in my life who gave me work. Not because they felt bad for me, but because they also believed in me. And that leads us to part 2, is how am I building my business as a digital nomad? Where I'm going to go through it year by year, 2019, 2020, 2021. I'm going to talk about finances. I'm going to talk about feelings. I'm going to talk about business failures and what has gone really freaking well to get me to a point where I'll share this with you. It is June 30th. We're halfway through the year. I have made almost as much this year as I did in the entire year 3 years ago. So this has been a slow burn. I have never broken 200K a year. I haven't had $1 million year. I don't fly private. I don't even fly first class. Are you kidding me? This is something that has been very intentional and very sustainable for me. I am living the exact life that I dreamed of when I wrote my journals in 2019 and 2020. I went back and referenced these before I started recording. I wrote down fitness goals. I wrote down finance goals. I wrote down feelings goals. And I'm living the exact life that I hoped that I would when I quit my job. So for that reason, the most challenging thing in the moment was taking the leap every time I've taken a leap. But what's really freaking worth it in the end is the relationships. So I'll end us there, and then I will dig into exactly how I built my business as a digital nomad and what that looks like personally, professionally, from a travel standpoint, and from a home standpoint. So stay tuned. Thanks for listening.